Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, we'll go over Tesla, go over the market, go over what has happened and what we can expect moving forward. But with all that being said and done, as usual, if you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. It does help a lot. And of course, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. Do your own research, make your own decisions, all that stuff. But the market closing in just about 2.5 minutes and looking like Tesla will be closing just shy of this $187 mark, which is putting us up pretty much 1% almost on the dot. So compared to the market, Tesla arguably, with an arguable outperformance here, nothing completely crazy or massive, but, definitely arguably outperforming, which is a pretty good sign. But what does this all mean? So as I'm sure you guys, I think you should be aware if you're following Tesla at all, the earnings are on Wednesday. Obviously, as we can all agree on, that is a pretty big deal. That can mean Tesla, it can move rather Tesla quite substantially, as it usually does. Actually, last earnings, I remember it started off really slow and seemed like it was doing nothing. And then the next day it actually moved substantially. Anyway, the point is that it will most likely move Tesla, pretty aggressively some direction. Now, let's talk about what happened so far and what we can expect moving into the earnings. Because right now, that's what we care about. How will we perform moving into Wednesday and including Wednesday itself before the market, of course, closes, as to which, of course, the earnings get reported shortly after, right? You can see the little, technically is actually still a bear, flag or bear wedge or whatever you want to call it, something like this right here. So far, again, not to jinx it or anything like that, so far, it does seem like it's actually playing out to the bullish side. Now, initially in the morning, we had a massive run up and it looked phenomenal, actually. So if you go on the 1 hour chart, this was definitely a bit of a bull trap into a bear trap. But initially what we had was a massive run up in the morning, all the way up to pretty much 190, almost on the dots. And then completely sold off all within the first hour of trading, right? In the first hour of trading, it actually also retested the breakout very briefly. You can see here, right? So it went up, kind of came down, almost like perfectly retested it, and then rallied up to that level, right? And then it looked great. It looked great. Everything was looking like, yeah, this is perfect. And then it came down to arguably retest the breakout, which is perfectly fine, pretty much right around this level right here. Right? This was essentially the retest and it looked potentially good. Like, yeah, you know what? It bounced, it's holding. This green candle looked like, yeah, it's a pretty good time to enter. And then it ended up being pretty much another massive bull trap here, and then a bear trap right here. And then it essentially went right back into the wedge, right? And that was pretty concerning. That's not what you want to see. Getting false breakouts is usually a pretty bad sign. That's not what you want to be seeing, in this case, at least as a bull. And that's essentially what we got, where we had a massive candle come back into the wedge, which on the 2 hour, you can see we never even closed a 2 hour candle actually above the wedge, right? So, which is why now I'm kind of prioritizing the 2 hour time frame over the 1 hour, because to me, the 1 hour has been slightly invalidated, at least for this specific move coming up right here. So the 2 hour seems to be a little bit more valid overall. But nonetheless, the 2 hour candle, pretty bearish looking candle here. It came back, actually went underneath this wedge over here, as you can see, actually kind of, went below it, which again, seems like a bear trap, right? All the way over here. And then ended up recapturing it, pretty much when it needed to. And then it ended up breaking out once again. And we not only broke out and actually closed above this wedge, which is a good sign for the bulls, but it also is actually holding above my little, I don't know if you rectangle over here, this kind of large rectangle I have, it's actually closing above it as well, which is also not a bad sign. As you can see many times, whether it's over here, we had massive rejection at the very top of this rectangle, whether it's even over here, just yesterday, or I guess not yesterday, Friday, a lot of rejection here as well. And now that we came above it on this candle, and the candle right after that, which is this one here, you can see it ended up essentially retesting it. And so far it seems successful. It's a pretty good sign. I'm not gonna lie, guys. The bulls are definitely showing some nice, buying pressure, if you will, here. Not the greatest volume in the entire world, but definitely some, it's okay, I guess, but definitely lower. One thing to note, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, very important to understand this is, let me delete this, as we were essentially, after this move finished and we came up to this, level right over here, and we started kind of consolidating, the volume has been decreasing as we have been consolidating, which is it's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. In fact, it's actually usually what's expected out of consolidation. As the volume decreases during this consolidation, the more it decreases, it's just another sign. Remember how I always bring up those Bollinger Bands, talking about the tighter it gets, the more, it's actually getting even tighter, by the way. But the tighter it gets, the more explosive the move will be. Same concept actually with this lower in volume, because like after you do this massive move, which we had over here, and then we start consolidating for quite a while now, and the volume goes down, 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 down. The concept is similar as to like the volume is going lower, but it's also kind of like building up the momentum. In this case, most likely for earnings, as people are waiting for that to be the major catalyst, and then most likely the volume explodes once again with the explosion in the actual stock price. So in other words, this is just another factor that I look at to tell me that a pretty substantial move is most likely on its way, like a pretty damn high chance, right? So again, combine that with the Bollinger Band, and I think we're in for some serious fireworks coming up, ladies and gentlemen, probably on earnings, if not the day after. So just, keep that in mind, right? So, and the reason I bring that up is because it's very important to understand this. Let me bring this up very quickly on Webull. Where's Webull? There it is, right? So it's pretty important to understand if you're someone that's, trading Tesla with options, most importantly options. I mean, even shares really, but specifically options, right? You want to look at, for instance, let's say in 4 days, as you can, hopefully you guys can see this properly. Okay. So, on this Friday, right? Obviously, which is the nearest date, which is obviously right after earnings, you can talk about, puts or calls. Doesn't really matter too much in this case. The thing that you want to kind of have an idea here is the implied volatility. You can see it's pretty high, right? It's, sitting around, kind of being roughly in the money, or at least very close to it, to the current strike, or the strike being close to the current price of the stock. You can see it's sitting at a pretty much 90%-ish implied volatility, going up all the way up to like 112 all the way there on calls or puts. Obviously, it's also pretty high up here too. So the point I'm trying to make here is the fact that the market is actually pricing in a decently substantial move after earnings. Like, it's thinking that it's gonna move pretty aggressively. And the reason that's important is that if not only does it move up to a certain threshold, because it's pricing, I'm not exactly sure how much of a percentage it's pricing in, but let's say if, as an example, it's pricing in a 7% move and Tesla moves to say 4% and nothing more than that, whether it's up or down, even if it went in your direction, there's a chance that you most likely will still ultimately lose on that trade, because it's gonna essentially have something called, a volatility crush or IV crush, where because it didn't move a certain amount of the market, essentially priced in into the options, that you still technically lose, even if you pick the right direction, but especially if you pick the wrong direction, then you really lose. So just keep that in mind, right? That's a kind of an important like bonus, I don't know, tip, if you will, to kind of, understand and really know what you're doing if you're potentially thinking of trading options on Tesla, more specifically buying options especially. But with that being said, as we talked about before, because Tesla did close above this level of this top of this little rectangle I have, which is essentially around this 186-ish level, and it closed above it, which is great, and arguably retested it, to me it looks like the bulls are actually in control. But remember, like we talked about, our run up into earnings to me is not so good. So essentially what I'll be looking for next is most likely another retest of about this kind of 190-ish level. Could be even as early as tomorrow. That definitely is not unexpected whatsoever, because the bulls, at least as of right now, especially, even according to the RSI, they seem like they have control. Again, this could all change extremely fast, especially with a stock and in a market like this, especially with earnings coming up. You have to be extra cautious, just my opinion. Okay, just not financial advice, just my thoughts, speaking loudly. But you want to be extra cautious, right? Because again, a lot of these can be just complete and utter fake outs. So be careful. But with that being said, the bulls do seem like they have control. The RSI is peeking its head out, which is great. So the bulls definitely seem like they want to make this thing run to at least 190. And that's essentially the next level I'll be looking for, about 190-ish, give or take 1 or 2 points, to see if we can break through that. If we can, go up here, and if we can actually consolidate or something like that, or just break right through it even, then I would definitely start looking for the next level, which would most likely be somewhere around the 195 to as high as, of course, the dreaded 200. But the main first level we'll be taking a look at, without question, is going to be 190. If we can break that, we'll talk about the next level, and we'll really see how it broke, how it's looking, and we'll dissect that even further tomorrow. But as of right now, as a bull or even a bear to enter shorts if you want, right? Definitely the 190 level is the next major level to be paying attention to and to really keep an eye out. But even then, if it does get to 190, I'd still be personally cautious entering shorts just yet, because again, keep in mind, not only can it still go even higher, it really depends on how it reacts to that level. But again, like I said, the options are extremely high in the implied volatility. So not only do you have to pick the right direction, but it's got to move a certain amount in that right direction for you to really truly profit, properly, if you will, off of those options. Again, if you're buying, if you're selling, pretty damn good time to sell options. But again, it can also backfire as well if it doesn't go in the direction that you were kind of hoping it would, right? So, obviously there's always a risk to everything you do. But if you're someone that's looking to sell options, it's not a bad time right now to, maybe, get a couple of those bad boys in there. But that's just my current thought process, and that's kind of what I'm seeing. Now, moving forward very quickly, taking a look at TSLQ, you can see it's still getting rejected by this overall trend line at the top. Like I said, if you're confused by Tesla, or if Tesla's looking confusing, or it's not really making sense as to what it's doing or what the hell's happening here, easily what you can do is look at TSLQ. And pretty much just wait for this thing to, if you're a bear, or if you're a bull and you want to, sell calls, which is a bearish play, or exit shares, or whatever the case may be. Whenever it breaks this line, that's probably going to be pretty bad for TSLA. So just keep that in mind. That is pretty important. And of course, the VIX is still just seeing no life, man. But this thing is just ridiculous. This is crazy to me. This is pretty ridiculous. Just keep in mind, guys, again, the lower this goes, the scarier it gets to be a bull. Just my thought, though. Keep that, take that as you will. Now, the one final thing I do want to mention one more time, or not one more time, but for TSLA, I guess, very quickly, is we have this situation here, but you can absolutely make an argument that this could also potentially be nothing more than a form of another bear flag like this. This is more of a bear pendant, but you can also have something like a bear flag like this. I mean, maybe not, honestly. Now that I'm looking at it better, maybe not so much. I mean, it could be like this easily. Like, you can definitely make an argument that it could be something like this right here. Let me go ahead and move this one back. Right? So you can absolutely make an argument like this. So we had one touch point, 2 touch points. Now we're on 3, potentially moving up to 4, and then 5. You can also make that argument right there, right? So again, this is something else to consider. Could be a massive, massive bear flag, creation right here happening. 1, 2, 3, 4, which pretty much is a run up to, like we talked about, pretty much close to that 200-ish level. Pretty much buy earnings actually would be tomorrow or Wednesday. And then it will be the massive bull trap, which, like I said, a run up into earnings to me is usually pretty suspicious. Doesn't mean it has to be. More often than not, pretty suspicious. And then of course it could be a massive bull trap into a pretty substantial fall from there. So just keep that in mind, but that's kind of what I'm seeing for now. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think down below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.